Welcome to my channel, the hidden drama where real-life stories unfold and every situation has a lesson. Some will surprise you, some will make you think, and some might feel closer to home than you expect. Now let's get into today's story. I paid for my husband's sister's medical bills and helped her start a business. When I lost my job, she told everyone I was toxic and dangerous. She turned my husband against me. On her wedding day, I arrived with a folder in my hand that contained everything she thought she destroyed. I stood there in that marble lobby clutching a folder against my chest, like it was the only thing keeping me upright, watching my husband stand beside his sister like I was a stranger who had wandered in off the street. The air smelled like expensive flowers and lies, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking even though I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head. Lillian wore her wedding dress like armor, all white silk and innocence, and when her eyes landed on me her smile didn't just fade, it shattered into something sharp and dangerous. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice carrying across the space between us, and I heard myself laugh, because after everything she'd done, after everything she'd taken from me, she still thought she could tell me where I belonged. "I invited myself," I said, raising the folder slightly so she could see it, so she could wonder what was inside, so she could feel just a fraction of the fear I'd lived with for months. "You just didn't expect me to bring receipts." "My name is Amelia Hartley, and I'm 36 years old, and up until 8 months ago, I thought I was good at reading people. But it turns out I'm only good at seeing what I want to see, which is probably my biggest flaw, besides my tendency to fix things that aren't mine to fix and my stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up would hurt less. I'm the person who plans everything down to the last detail because chaos terrifies me, the person who throws money and time and sleepless nights at other people's problems, because somewhere deep down I believe that if I'm useful enough, if I'm helpful enough, people will stay, and they'll be loyal, and they'll love me the way I love them. I was a financial analyst before the restructuring, the kind who could spot irregularities in spreadsheets at 3 in the morning, the kind who organized her spice rack alphabetically and her life the same way, and maybe that obsessive need for control is what blinded me to what was happening right under my nose. Daniel stood there beside his sister looking at me like I was the problem, like I was the one who had destroyed our family, and that hurt worse than anything Lillian had done, because he was supposed to be mine, he was supposed to choose me, and instead he chose her lies over my truth. 3 years ago, when Lillian collapsed during Sunday dinner, and the ambulance came screaming up to the house, and the doctors said it was some rare autoimmune thing that insurance would barely cover, I didn't hesitate. I pulled money from my retirement account, from the house renovation fund, from every savings account I'd been building since college, because that's what family does, right? That's what love looks like. I paid for experimental treatments and specialist appointments and medications with names I couldn't pronounce, and when she finally got better, when she could walk without assistance and eat without pain, I felt like I'd accomplished something real, like I'd earned my place in this family. Then she came to me with this business idea, this boutique skincare line using natural ingredients and sustainability messaging, and she looked at me with those big grateful eyes and said, "You saved my life, Amelia, and now I want to build something meaningful, and I need your help." So I helped, because that's what I do. I fix things, I solve problems, I make things work. I spent 6 months designing budgets and securing small business loans, and building her website from scratch, teaching myself code at midnight, because I'm too stubborn to hire someone when I can figure it out myself. I connected her with suppliers and reviewed contracts, and set up her accounting systems, and she called me her angel, her savior, her hero. And I believed her, because I wanted to believe her, because my whole sense of self-worth was wrapped up in being needed, being essential, being the one who holds everything together. The business started making money, not a lot, but enough, and Lillian kept asking for more help, more time, more expertise, and I kept giving it, because watching something I'd built succeed felt better than anything I'd accomplished in my corporate job, where I was just another analyst in a sea of analysts, where nobody would miss me if I disappeared tomorrow. Then the restructuring happened 6 months ago, sudden and brutal, the way these things always are, and I came home with a cardboard box full of desk supplies, and a severance package that wouldn't last 3 months, and I thought Daniel would hold me, while I cried, would tell me everything would be okay, would remind me that I was more than my job. Instead, he looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, this mixture of disappointment and something darker, something that looked almost like disgust, and he said, "Maybe this is a sign you need to reassess things, Because you've been obsessing over Lillian's business anyway, you've been spending more time on her projects than on us. I stared at him confused, because I'd been helping his sister, because he'd asked me to, because family was supposed to matter. But he just shook his head and walked away, leaving me standing there in our kitchen, holding that stupid cardboard box, wondering, when everything had shifted beneath my feet. The whispers started 2 days later, little comments from his mother Elena, about how I seemed stressed, how I'd always been a bit controlling, how maybe the job loss was affecting my judgment. And I brushed them off, because Elena had never liked me anyway, had always thought Daniel could do better, could find someone from a better family, someone who fit their world more naturally. But then other relatives started saying things, started looking at me with concern and pity, asking if I was feeling okay, if maybe I needed to talk to someone professionally. And I realized something was spreading, some poison was working its way through the family, turning me from hero to villain in a matter of weeks. Lillian called me one afternoon, asked me to meet her for coffee, and I went because I still trusted her, because I still believed we were on the same side. And she sat across from me in that little cafe, stirring sugar into her latte, and said, "I'm worried about you, Amelia. You've been acting erratic ever since you lost your job, and I think you need help." I laughed because surely she was joking, surely she remembered everything I'd done for her, but her face stayed serious, stayed concerned in that performative way that made my skin crawl. "What are you talking about?" I asked, and she leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "You've been calling me at odd hours, leaving rambling voicemails about the business, demanding access to accounts that aren't yours, making threats about what you'll do if I don't give you control. Daniel's told me everything. You've been trying to manipulate the whole family through money, and now that you don't have any power, you're lashing out." My hands went numb around my coffee cup, because none of that was true. I hadn't called her at odd hours, hadn't demanded anything, hadn't made threats. And I said, "Lillian, that's not what happened, that's not what any of this is." But she just gave me this sad, sympathetic smile, and patted my hand like I was a child who couldn't understand reality. "I know you don't see it that way, and that's what makes this so hard, but I can't let you destroy yourself or this family. I think you need space. I think you need to step back from all of us until you get help." I pulled my hand away, stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You're lying," I said, my voice shaking because anger was flooding through me, hot and sharp. "I don't know why you're doing this, but you're lying." She looked up at me with those innocent eyes and said quietly, "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The paranoia, the aggression. Please, Amelia, get help before you hurt someone." I left that cafe feeling like reality had tilted sideways, like I was living in some alternate universe where up was down and black was white. And when I got home, Daniel was packing my things into suitcases. "What are you doing?" I asked, and he didn't look at me, didn't meet my eyes, just kept folding my clothes with mechanical precision. "You need to stay somewhere else for a while," he said, "just until you get yourself together." I felt something inside me crack, something fundamental and weight-bearing. Get myself together? Daniel, what is she telling you? He finally looked at me, and his face was cold, closed off like I was looking at a stranger. "She's telling me the truth, that you've been unstable for months, that you've been trying to control everyone through money and manipulation, that you threatened her business if she didn't do what you wanted." Mom confirmed it. She said you've always been like this, always needed to be in charge, always used your resources as leverage. My chest felt tight like I couldn't get enough air. "That's not true, none of that is true, and you know it, you know me, Daniel, you know I would never." But he cut me off, raised his hand like he couldn't bear to hear another word. "I don't think I know you at all. I think I've been blind to who you really are because I wanted to believe you were different. Lillian showed me the messages you sent her, the voicemails you left, and Amelia, they're disturbing. You need professional help, and until you get it, I need you out of this house." I wanted to scream, wanted to throw things, wanted to demand he show me these supposed messages, because I knew I'd never sent them. But looking at his face, looking at the way, he'd already decided I was guilty, already chosen his sister over his wife. I knew nothing I said would matter. So I took the suitcases and I left, and I spent that night in a hotel room that smelled like cleaning chemicals and old carpet, crying, until I couldn't cry anymore, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely in the span of a few weeks. The next morning I woke up with my eyes swollen and my head pounding, and something new burning in my chest, something hard and cold and determined. Because I'm stubborn, remember, I'm obsessive. I don't give up even when giving up would be easier, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let Lillian destroy me without a fight. I spent the first week in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping, just replaying everything that had happened, trying to find the moment where things went wrong trying to understand how she'd done it. And then I started thinking like an analyst, started approaching this like a problem that needed solving, like a puzzle that had a solution, if I could just find the right pieces. I pulled up my bank records, went through every transaction I'd made for Lillian's medical bills and her business, and I started seeing things that didn't add up: invoices that seemed high, procedures that seemed unnecessary, duplicate charges that shouldn't exist. I made spreadsheets because that's what I do, that's how I process chaos. I organize it into columns and rows and formulas, and the more I organized, the more irregularities I found. I called my old colleague Carla Medina, who'd left corporate finance to become a forensic accountant who specialized in fraud detection, and I asked her to meet me for lunch. We sat in this little sandwich shop, and I spread out my printouts across the table, and she studied them with those sharp brown eyes that miss nothing. "What am I looking at?" she asked, and I said, "I think my sister-in-law has been lying about her medical expenses, and I need you to help me prove it." Carla looked at me for a long moment like she was assessing whether I was crazy, whether this was worth her time, and then she picked up one of the invoices, held it up to the light. "This is a copy," she said. "A bad one. See the pixelation here? This wasn't scanned from an original, this was created digitally." My heart started pounding. "Can you prove that?" She smiled, this small, dangerous smile. "For the right price I can prove anything that's true. Give me 2 weeks and access to whatever records you have, and I'll tell you exactly what your sister-in-law has been up to." I hired her that day, used the last of my severance to pay her retainer, because I needed to know, I needed proof. I needed something solid that would make Daniel believe me, that would make everyone see what Lillian really was. While Carla worked, I started going through my own records, my emails, my text messages, my voicemails, trying to find evidence of these supposed threats I'd allegedly made. And of course there was nothing, because I'd never made them. But that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. If there was no evidence, then Lillian had created it. She'd fabricated messages, she'd forged voicemails, she'd constructed an entire false narrative, and somehow made it convincing enough that my own husband believed her over me. I started thinking about all the times I'd given her access to my computer to use my software, when we were building her website, all the times I'd let her borrow my phone, when hers was dead, all the little moments of trust that she could have exploited. And I felt sick, because I'd handed her the tools to destroy me. I'd been so desperate to help, so eager to be needed, that I'd never protected myself, never imagined she'd turn on me. 2 weeks later, Carla called me, asked me to come to her office, and when I got there she had files spread across her desk, physical files and digital records, and her expression was grim. "Sit down," she said, and I sat. "Your instincts were right. Lillian Chen," I interrupted her. "Wait, her name isn't Chen, it's Hartley. Lillian Hartley." Carla frowned, checked her notes. "Right, sorry, I was looking at a different case." Lillian Hartley has been running a very sophisticated fraud operation using her medical crisis and her business as cover. About 40% of the medical bills you paid were either inflated or completely fabricated. She used real invoices from her treatment, but altered the amounts or submitted duplicates from different providers, hoping nobody would cross-reference them. As for the business, it's worse. She's been creating fake suppliers, running money through shell accounts and hiding profits offshore. She's not struggling, she's making significant income and concealing it. I felt dizzy, like the room was spinning. "How much money are we talking about?" Carla pulled out a summary sheet, slid it across the desk. "Based on what I can trace, you personally gave her approximately $200,000 over 3 years. Of that, maybe 60% went to legitimate expenses. The rest she pocketed. As for the business, she's generated over $500,000 in revenue in the past 18 months, but she's reporting losses on paper. The money's going somewhere, and I'd bet my license it's not legal." I stared at the numbers, feeling rage build in my chest, hot and sharp and consuming. "Can you prove all of this in a way that would hold up legally?" Carla nodded. "Absolutely. I can document every transaction, every discrepancy, every fake invoice." "But Amelia, you need to understand, if you go public with this, it's going to explode. This isn't just family drama, this is criminal fraud, tax evasion, potentially money laundering. People will go to jail." Good, I thought. Let them go to jail, let Lillian face consequences, let everyone see what she really is. But I didn't say that out loud, because I was already planning, I was already thinking 3 steps ahead, trying to figure out the best way to use this information for maximum impact. "I need you to compile everything," I told Carla. "Every document, every email, every transaction, record everything that proves what she's done. I need it organized in a way that someone without a financial background could understand. Can you do that?" She raised an eyebrow. I can, but what are you planning? I smiled and it felt cold on my face, felt like something foreign. I'm planning to give her exactly what she deserves. Over the next month I became obsessed, and I know that's not healthy. I know my tendency to fixate on things, to lose myself in problems that need solving, is one of my worst flaws, but I couldn't stop, couldn't think about anything else, except making Lillian pay for what she'd done. I barely slept, just stayed up reviewing documents, planning strategy, thinking through every possible angle, every possible response she might have. My hotel room became covered in papers and sticky notes and timelines, and I knew I looked crazy, knew I was acting exactly like the unstable person Lillian had painted me as, but I didn't care because I had the truth, I had proof, and that was all that mattered. I tried calling Daniel a few times, left messages, saying I needed to talk to him, that I had information he needed to see, but he never called back, and eventually his mother Alina called me instead. Stop harassing my son, she said, her voice ice cold. You've done enough damage to this family. If you contact Daniel or Lillian again, I'll get a restraining order. I wanted to scream at her, wanted to tell her that her precious daughter was a criminal, that she'd been fooled just like everyone else, but I bit my tongue, stayed silent, because I knew anything I said would just be used against me, would just prove I was the crazy, vindictive ex-wife they'd painted me as. Then Carla called with something new, something that made everything worse. I found deleted emails, she said, recovered from cloud backups. Conversations between Lillian and Daniel from about 8 months ago, right before your job loss. My stomach dropped. What do they say? There was a pause, a heavy silence. Amelia, I don't think you want to know, but I did want to know. I needed to know, even if it destroyed me. Tell me, she sighed. Daniel knew, not everything, but he knew Lillian was exaggerating her medical expenses. There's an email where he tells her to be careful, tells her you're good with numbers and might catch on. She responds saying she'll handle you, that you're too desperate to be helpful to question anything. Then there's another exchange from right after you lost your job where she tells Daniel this is the perfect opportunity to discredit you, to make you look unstable, so nobody believes you if you do figure things out. And Daniel, he doesn't object. He just says he'll support whatever she needs him to do. I felt something break inside me, something I didn't know could break, because losing my job, losing my home, losing my reputation, those things hurt. But knowing my husband had betrayed me, had been part of the plan to destroy me, that was a different kind of pain, that was the kind that makes you question everything you ever believed about love and loyalty and trust. Send me everything, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. Every email, every message, every piece of evidence you have. I want it all. That night I sat in my hotel room staring at those emails, reading Daniel's words over and over again, seeing how casually he'd agreed to throw me away, how easily he'd chosen his sister over his wife. And something inside me shifted, something fundamental changed, because I wasn't Amelia, the helpful wife, anymore. I wasn't Amelia, the problem solver. I was someone new, someone harder, someone who understood that sometimes the only way to survive is to burn everything down and rise from the ashes. I started planning the revenge not as some vague concept, but as a concrete strategy with specific steps and measurable outcomes, because that's how my brain works, that's how I process pain. I turn it into action. Lillian was getting married. I knew that much. Daniel had told me before he stopped speaking to me entirely. She was marrying some wealthy investor named Victor Ramos, who'd put money into her business, who believed her sweet, innocent act. And I thought about the guest list, thought about everyone who would be there, all the family members who turned against me, all the business partners and investors who'd bought into her lies, all the people who needed to see the truth. The wedding was the perfect stage, the perfect moment, when everyone would be gathered, when Lillian would be at her most vulnerable, when exposing her would have maximum impact. But I had to be careful, had to plan this perfectly, because if I messed it up, if I let my anger get the better of me, if I acted impulsively the way I sometimes do when I'm hurt, then she'd just use it against me, would paint me as the crazy ex-sister-in-law disrupting a wedding out of jealousy and spite. So I made lists, detailed lists of exactly what I needed to do, created backup plans for my backup plans, tried to anticipate every possible response, every potential obstacle. Carla thought I was losing it, told me I should just go to the police, let them handle it, let the legal system deal with Lillian. But I knew better, knew the system moves slowly, knew that by the time anything happened, Lillian would have hidden the evidence, would have constructed new lies, would have turned even more people against me. No, I needed to do this myself, needed to control the narrative, needed to make sure everyone saw the truth simultaneously, so there was no time for her to spin it, no opportunity for her to explain it away. The wedding was set for a Saturday in early spring at this expensive venue, with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place that screams money and status. And I spent the week before rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the evidence, trying to keep my emotions in check, trying not to let my anger, my hurt, my desperate need for vindication overwhelm the facts. I bought a simple black dress, nothing dramatic, nothing that would draw attention before I was ready, because I wanted the focus to be on the information, not on me, wanted people to see the documents, not the wronged wife having a breakdown. I had Carla prepare everything in a grey folder, thick and professional looking, organized with tabs and summaries, designed for maximum clarity, maximum impact. The night before the wedding, I barely slept, just lay in my hotel bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, imagining how it would unfold, wondering if I was making a mistake, if I was letting my worst impulses, my need for control, my stubborn refusal to let things go, drive me to do something I'd regret. But then I thought about how Lillian had looked at me in that cafe with fake concern and false sympathy, how she'd convinced my own husband I was dangerous, how she'd stolen my money and my reputation and my life, and I knew I had to do this, knew I had no other choice, because letting her win, letting her get away with it, would destroy me more completely than any revenge ever could. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear, and I drove to the venue with the folder on my passenger seat, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I parked in the lot, walked across the pavement toward the entrance, and that's when I saw them, Daniel and Lillian, standing in the marble lobby, talking to Elena, probably going over last-minute details, probably celebrating how perfectly everything had worked out, how completely they'd won. I pushed through the glass doors, and the sound of my heels clicking on marble echoed through the space, and they all turned to look at me, their faces shifting from confusion to alarm to anger in the span of seconds. "You shouldn't be here," Lillian said, stepping forward in her white dress, looking like a princess from some fairy tale, except the princess in this story was the villain, was the monster wearing a pretty face. I clutched the folder tighter, felt the weight of it solid and real, and I said, "I invited myself, you just didn't expect me to bring receipts." Daniel moved toward me. "Amelia, what are you doing?" His voice had that tone, that warning tone, like I was a child misbehaving, like I was the problem and not the victim. "What I should have done months ago," I said, telling the truth. Elena grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 60s. "You need to leave right now before I call security." I looked at her, at this woman who'd never liked me, who'd always thought I wasn't good enough for her son, who'd believed every lie Lillian told without question. "Go ahead, call security," I said, "but I think the guests might want to see this first." I pulled away from her, walked toward the reception hall, where people were already gathering, early arrivals mingling with champagne and small talk, and behind me I heard Lillian say, "Stop her, Daniel, stop her now," her voice rising into something sharp and desperate, something that didn't sound innocent at all. I pushed through the doors into the reception hall, and heads turned, conversations paused, and I felt every eye in the room land on me, felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their confusion. The venue had a projector set up for speeches and slideshow presentations, and I'd known it would be here, had planned for this, had even called ahead, pretending to be part of the wedding party, to confirm the technical setup. I walked to the front table, placed my folder down, opened my laptop that I'd been carrying in my bag. "What's going on?" Victor Ramos appeared beside me, this handsome, well-dressed man who I'd never met, who had no idea he was about to marry a criminal. "Who are you?" I looked at him and felt a flash of pity, because he was about to have his life turned upside down, about to learn that the woman he loved was a lie. "I'm Amelia Hartley," I said, "Lillian's sister-in-law. And I have some information I think you and everyone else here should see before this wedding continues." Lillian rushed in, Daniel right behind her, and she was pale, her perfect makeup not quite hiding the fear in her eyes. "Don't listen to her," she said to the room, to Victor, to anyone who would hear. "She's been harassing me for months, she's unstable, she's dangerous, this is exactly the kind of thing." But I cut her off, plugged my laptop into the projector, and the screen behind me lit up with the first document. "I'm going to let the evidence speak for itself," I said, my voice steady, even though inside I was shaking, was terrified, was riding this wave of adrenaline and rage and vindication that felt like it might consume me. The first image appeared, medical invoices side by side, one real, one altered, the differences highlighted in yellow. A murmur rippled through the crowd, people leaning forward to read the screen, to understand what they were seeing. 3 years ago, when Lillian got sick, I paid her medical bills," I said, projecting my voice the way I'd practiced. I paid $200,000 because that's what family does, except 40% of these bills were fake, inflated amounts, duplicate charges, completely fabricated procedures. Lillian lunged toward the laptop, but Daniel caught her, held her back, and she turned on him. "Do something, stop her, you promised you'd handle this," she hissed, and I saw several people near them hear it, saw their expressions shift from confusion to suspicion. I clicked to the next slide, business records showing fake vendors and shell accounts, money moving through complicated pathways designed to hide its origin and destination. Then I helped her start her skincare business, I continued. I designed the budget, secured loans, built the website. She told everyone the business was struggling, but according to these records, she's generated over $500,000 in revenue and hidden it through fraudulent accounting. She's not a struggling entrepreneur, she's running a money laundering operation. The room erupted, people talking over each other, investors pulling out phones, probably calling lawyers. Victor standing frozen, staring at the screen like he couldn't process what he was seeing. Elena pushed through the crowd, grabbed my arm again, harder this time, angry and desperate. "How dare you come here and spread these lies on my daughter's wedding day?" she said, her voice shaking. "You're jealous, you're bitter, you can't stand to see her happy." I pulled up the next document, emails between Lillian and Daniel, the ones Carla had recovered, and I saw Elena's face change, saw the moment she recognized her son's email address, saw doubt creep into her certainty. "These are emails between Lillian and Daniel from 8 months ago," I said, reading from the screen. "Daniel writes, 'Be careful with the medical billing. Amelia's good with numbers, she might catch on.' Lillian responds, 'I'll handle her, she's too desperate to be helpful to question anything.' Then after I lost my job, Lillian writes, 'This is perfect, we can make her look unstable so nobody believes her if she figures it out.' And Daniel responds, 'I'll support whatever you need.'" The silence that fell was complete and absolute, everyone staring at the screen at these words, that proved conspiracy, that proved betrayal, that proved everything I'd been saying was true. I looked at Daniel, saw him standing there pale and shocked, and I felt something twist in my chest, because part of me had hoped I'd been wrong, had hoped he'd been manipulated, had hoped he still loved me somewhere beneath the lies. But his face told me everything I needed to know, told me he'd known, he'd chosen, he'd been complicit all along. "You bastard," Victor said quietly, and at first I thought he was talking to me, but then I realized he was looking at Daniel, looking at Lillian, his hands clenched into fists. "You lying, scheming bastards, both of you." Lillian turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and I had to admit she was good, she could cry on command, could make herself look vulnerable and wounded. "Victor, please let me explain, this isn't what it looks like, she's twisting everything, she's..." But he held up his hand, cutting her off. "Don't, just don't, I've heard enough." He pulled the ring off his finger, placed it on the table between them. "We're done." I clicked to the final slide, the voice recording I'd debated including, because it felt almost too cruel, but then I remembered how cruel she'd been to me, how she'd destroyed my life without hesitation, and I played it. Lillian's voice filled the reception hall, clear and unmistakable. "Once the business takes off, I'll cut Amelia out. She's stupid enough to pay for everything anyway. Daniel knows what we're doing, but he won't say anything. Blood is thicker than water, and she's just the wife. Wives can be replaced." The words hung in the air, poisonous and final, and I watched Lillian's face crumble, watched her perfect facade shatter as everyone in that room saw her for what she really was. Elena was crying now, pressing her hand to her mouth, and I saw her look at Lillian with something that might have been recognition, might have been horror, might have been the first stirrings of maternal disappointment. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said to the room, even though that was a lie, even though revenge was exactly what this was. "I came here because the truth matters, because she destroyed my reputation, my marriage, my life, and she did it with lies. You all believed her. You all thought I was the problem. But here's the proof, here's the evidence, and I'm done being silent." Security was coming toward me, 2 men in suits, probably called by someone in the crowd, but I didn't care because I'd done it, I'd said what I needed to say, I'd shown everyone the truth. Lillian was sobbing now, ugly, desperate sobs, and she grabbed Daniel's arm. "Fix this," she said. "You have to fix this, you promised." But Daniel was staring at the floor, wouldn't meet her eyes, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, and I saw the moment he realized there was no fixing this, no going back, no way to undo what had been revealed. People were leaving now, some heading for the exits, some clustering in groups to gossip, to process what they'd just witnessed, and I saw several investors approach Victor, probably to discuss what this meant for their money, for their business dealings with Lillian. I closed my laptop, picked up my folder, and walked toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in months, feeling like some enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But as I reached the parking lot, as I thought I was done, thought I was free, my phone buzzed with a text. From Daniel. The preview showed just a few words. You didn't show them everything. I stopped walking, felt ice flood my veins, and opened the message fully. Attached was a document I'd never seen before, a loan agreement with my signature at the bottom, except I'd never signed it, never even seen it before. The loan was for $300,000 from some private lender, and according to the terms, I'd personally guaranteed it. I'd used it to fund Lillian's business. I'd authorized transfers that, according to Carla's investigation, were the largest fraudulent transactions. I stared at the screen, feeling reality tilt again, feeling the ground drop out from under me, because this was forged, had to be forged, but it looked real, looked legitimate. And if investigators believed it, if they thought I'd been part of the fraud all along, then everything I'd just done, every truth I'd just revealed would be cast in a different light, would look like a guilty person trying to deflect blame, trying to destroy evidence, trying to frame someone else for crimes I'd committed. Another text came through. Lillian kept insurance. If you take her down, she takes you with her. The police are already investigating the business. This document puts you at the center of it. How's it feel to realize you didn't win? I looked back at the venue, saw Daniel standing in the doorway watching me, his face expressionless, and I understood with perfect clarity what they'd done, what they'd planned, what trap I'd walked into so confidently, thinking I held all the cards. They'd let me expose Lillian, let me destroy her wedding, let me burn her reputation, because they knew they had this, they knew they could make me look complicit, could paint me as a co-conspirator who turned on her partner when things got too hot. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone, and I heard sirens in the distance growing closer, and I didn't know if they were coming for me or if paranoia was making me imagine threats, but either way I knew the real war was just beginning. I'd won the battle, destroyed Lillian's wedding, ruined her reputation, exposed her crimes, but the war, the actual fight for my freedom, for my future, that was going to be so much harder than I'd anticipated. I got in my car, started the engine, and as I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw police cars turning and saw Daniel pointing in my direction, saw officers approaching, and I made a choice. I drove away, not running exactly, but not staying either, because I needed time, needed to think, needed to figure out how to fight this new threat, this new level of betrayal. My phone kept buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably police, probably investigators, and I knew I couldn't run forever, knew I'd have to face this eventually, but right now in this moment, I just drove, feeling everything I'd thought I'd accomplished crumble behind me, feeling my flaws, my impulsiveness, my need for dramatic confrontation, my inability to think past my anger, come back to haunt me, because I should have gone to the police first, should have built a legal case, should have protected myself before I exposed her, but I'd been so focused on revenge, so obsessed with making her pay, that I'd walked right into her trap. Over the next few days, I learned the full extent of what Lillian and Daniel had prepared, learned how they'd been building this insurance policy for months, planting evidence, creating a paper trail that would implicate me if I ever tried to expose them. The forged loan agreement was just the beginning. There were emails they'd fabricated using my compromised accounts. There were wire transfer authorizations with my digital signature. There were meetings they claimed I'd attended with fake suppliers, where I'd allegedly helped set up the shell companies. Carla called me furious because investigators had contacted her asking why she'd helped me cover up fraud, asking if I'd paid her to create false evidence to frame my innocent sister-in-law. And I knew they'd poisoned that well too, had made sure anyone who tried to help me would be seen as complicit, would be dragged down with me. I hired a lawyer, used the last of my money to retain someone who specialized in financial fraud, and she looked at everything I showed her, all my evidence, all my proof, and she said, "This is good, but it's not enough to counter what they have on you. You look like a co-conspirator who got cold feet. The prosecution will argue you helped Lillian set everything up and only turned on her when you lost your job, lost your income, lost your ability to benefit from the scheme." I sat in her office feeling defeated, feeling like I'd fought so hard only to end up in a worse position than where I'd started. "So what do?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair, studied me with these sharp, calculating eyes. "You do what you should have done from the beginning. You cooperate with investigators. You give them everything, you have every document, every email, every piece of evidence Carla compiled, and you admit what you did wrong, admit you should have gone to authorities instead of staging that wedding confrontation, and you hope they believe you're a victim who made bad choices, not a criminal trying to save herself." The investigation took months of interviews and depositions and forensic accounting reviews, And through it all I had to watch Lillian play. The victim had to see her on local news crying about how her trusted sister-in-law had betrayed her, had stolen from her business, had fabricated evidence to destroy her reputation when she tried to cut ties. She was convincing, I'll give her that she knew exactly how to present herself as the wounded party, and there were days I thought I was going to lose, thought I was going to end up in prison for crimes she'd committed. But slowly, carefully, the investigators started seeing through her lies, started finding inconsistencies in her story, started realizing the forged documents didn't quite match up with the timeline, didn't quite make sense given other evidence. Carla was cleared first, the investigators determining she'd acted in good faith, had been hired by someone she believed was a victim, and hadn't falsified anything. Then they started looking harder at Daniel's involvement, started questioning why he'd been so quick to support his sister's version of events, started finding his fingerprints on some of the shell company formations. The turning point came when they found the original recording, the one I'd played at the wedding stored on Lillian's personal cloud, account with metadata that proved it was real, proved she'd said those things, proved she'd planned to frame me all along. Victor came forward too, gave investigators emails. Lillian had sent him emails where she'd been careless, where she'd admitted more than she should have about the business, about the money, about how easy it had been to manipulate her family. 6 months after that wedding day, disaster, 6 months of legal hell and sleepless nights, and wondering if I'd destroyed my own life in my quest for revenge, the prosecutors finally made their decision. Charges against me were dropped. Charges against Lillian were filed: fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, a list so long it made me dizzy to read. Daniel was charged too: conspiracy to commit fraud and obstruction of justice for his role in helping her cover it up, helping her frame me. The day I got the call from my lawyer telling me I was cleared, I sat in my apartment, the cheap one-bedroom I'd moved into, when I couldn't afford the hotel anymore, and I cried not tears of joy exactly, but tears of exhaustion, of relief, of finally being able to breathe after months of holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I thought about what this whole experience had taught me, about how my flaws, my need to fix things, my obsessive planning, my inability to ask for help, had both saved me and nearly destroyed me. If I'd been less stubborn, I might have given up, might have accepted Lillian's narrative and disappeared into obscurity. But if I'd been less impulsive, less focused on dramatic revenge, less desperate to make her pay in the most public way possible, I might have avoided months of legal hell, might have protected myself better, might have won without nearly losing everything. I learned I'm not the hero of this story. I'm just a flawed person who got hurt, who fought back, and who got lucky that the truth eventually came out. Lillian went to trial. I didn't attend, couldn't stomach seeing her face again, but I heard she maintained her innocence to the end, insisted she was the victim of a conspiracy. The jury didn't believe her. She got 6 years in federal prison. Victor testified against her, which probably didn't help her case, and last I heard she's trying to appeal, claiming ineffective counsel, claiming new evidence, claiming anything that might reduce her sentence. Daniel took a plea deal, got 2 years and supervised release, and I heard through mutual acquaintances he's living with Elena now, working some low-level job, trying to rebuild his life. We never spoke again, never had that final conversation where he might have apologized, where I might have gotten closure. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some relationships are meant to end in silence, in absence, in the empty space where words used to be. I eventually got a new job, nothing glamorous, just contract work for small businesses, helping them with their finances, and it's enough to pay rent, to rebuild my savings, to start over. I'm in therapy now, working through the trust issues, working through the anger, working through the obsessive tendencies that served me well in my revenge, but would probably destroy me if I let them run my life. My therapist asks me if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, and honestly I don't know. Part of me wishes I'd been smarter, more careful, less driven by emotion and wounded pride. Part of me is glad I fought back, glad I didn't let Lillian win, glad I stood up for myself, even if I did it imperfectly. The truth is, revenge doesn't feel the way you think it will when you're planning it, when you're imagining that moment of vindication. It feels complicated, messy, bittersweet, because even when you win, even when the bad guys go to jail, and the truth comes out, you don't get back what you lost. I didn't get my marriage back, didn't get those years back, didn't get to undo the pain and betrayal and fear. I just got to move forward, got to start building something new from the ruins of what was. And maybe that's enough, maybe that has to be enough, because dwelling on what could have been, what should have been, will only trap me in the past, will only let Lillian continue to hurt me even from prison. So I'm moving forward, I'm learning from my mistakes, I'm trying to be better, less controlling, less obsessive, less willing to sacrifice everything for people who haven't earned it. I'm learning to protect myself, to value my own worth, to understand that being helpful, being useful, being needed isn't the same as being loved. It's hard unlearning patterns I've had my whole life, but I'm trying, and maybe that's all anyone can do. Just keep trying, keep growing, keep learning from the mess we make of things. The folder sits in my closet now, that grey folder full of evidence, full of proof, and sometimes I take it out and look through it, and remember that day, remember the fear and adrenaline and satisfaction of finally telling the truth. It reminds me I'm stronger than I thought, reminds me I survived something that should have broken me, reminds me that even flawed, imperfect, stubborn people like me can fight back, can demand justice, can refuse to be victims. And that maybe, just maybe, is the real revenge, not the public confrontation, not the destroyed wedding, not the prison sentences, but the simple act of surviving, of refusing to be erased, of standing up and saying I matter, my truth matters, and you don't get to rewrite history just because it's convenient. So here I am, still standing, still fighting, still learning, and if that's not a happy ending, it's at least an honest one, and after everything I've been through, honesty feels like enough. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.